Welcome to take over the most underrated sports. Wait. This is a different setting. Welcome to Takeover from the crib. And I want to definitely say a Merry Christmas to you guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Guys, how are you guys doing? It's been a minute. It's been like a week. How's Takeover doing?
Cam, it's still been a month and a half, and yet the Atlanta Braves are still World Series champions. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm on top of the world, and that's not changing until eventually they lose the title, which they won't because they're repeating. But other than that, I'm chilling.
I'm good. I'm just ready for today's episode.
All right, guys, well, let's get right into it. Welcome to Takeover.
Yeah, we play it all in night. Yeah, need it all in advance. The opposition know we're ready for it. Like a supper we eating, it won't be the last. Grind all the muscle, pull up. Parker right on the grass. We coming in, take over everything, run it up. Nothing holding me back. 3 in the wood, rushing.
Starting off today, guys, there's been a whole lot of players on COVID protocol. It's definitely wrecked the NBA as a whole. Every time you look on your phone, every time you look on a Bleacher Report, he's out due to COVID protocol. We have a positive test. We have a negative test. So it pins up the question: should the bubble return in the NBA?
Quite simply, I think it's 100% a resounding no for the simple fact of the one thing that it does solve, it's then going to create 5 separate problems. The reason the bubble was so, it was useful during COVID was because everybody else was in their homes. Nobody was going anywhere. So they were able to find pretty easily a large venue that could handle 400 players plus team staff and have multiple areas for people to play their games. There's no way the NBA is going to be able to bubble right now just for that sheer fact. They're not going to be able to bubble in one specific city because those cities only have one NBA arena. They're not going to be able to use Disney World because Disney World's not going to shut down just for the NBA because Disney World's completely open because Florida isn't doing any kind of mandates right now whatsoever. So they wouldn't be able to actually find a venue. So there isn't any feasible way to do it. And on top of that, the other stuff that the bubble created, we heard Paul George talk about it after the season in 2020, was the mental health stuff. And that was just for a month and a half to 2 months. The season isn't over until May. So we're going to ask players for 5 months to just go into complete isolation, have nobody else come in or out, only be around their team, have to entertain themselves like that. That is dangerously close to complete isolation socially. And I don't think that that's good for the players in general. I mean, when you think about it, with the way that we've seen COVID develop, this new variant is very contagious, but the cases are very mild. Everybody in the NBA has either been asymptomatic or have a very mild case. So the only concern with them is them potentially spreading it to older coaches who are much more at risk. They're not getting super sick, so just completely bubbling doesn't necessarily make sense from that regard too. So there's so many reasons why a bubble isn't feasible. So they should just continue to soldier on. What they're doing right now with the whole signing one player for every player that gets COVID, that's a good policy. I like it because you're getting a lot of guys are getting a chance to get back in the league. It's good for those players to get signed, and it's also good for the team because they don't have to try to play a game with 7 guys. So for those reasons, a bubble just doesn't make any sense.
All right, so I hear what you're saying, Josh. I think the bubble should return only in the playoffs, though. I feel what you say about the regular season because it's so long for isolation. But according to Forbes, there's been 100 NBA players that have gone in the COVID protocol, and just last night, according to New York Times, there's been 8,748 new cases of COVID just in America in general. I think the American public has really gotten lax about the whole entire COVID situation. Ever since the vaccine came out, everyone's outside, everyone's doing everything. I think it's definitely showed, and I think what the bubble does, at least in the playoff setting, is puts everyone in a controlled environment. And I think it provides 2 things. I think it provides health for the players so they don't get COVID in the bubble come playoff time. And it provides great entertainment, which the NBA kind of missed out on last year with all the injuries. And then when I talk about injuries, I know this isn't really an injury type thing, but last season we had an episode, will there be any asterisks toward the winner? Let's say we don't go into the bubble and then someone goes in the COVID protocol, a Trae Young or Giannis Antetokounmpo. If they go into COVID protocol and someone loses that series, how serious are we going to take that winner? I feel like once we put everybody in a bubble, it puts everyone in a situation to where that doesn't happen, especially in a playoff setting, and we get the best entertainment. We get all our favorite players in one setting, and I feel like it takes away anything that could take their minds off of basketball, which is basically what the playoffs is all about. But at the end of the day, I mean, these are grown men. They're going to do what they want to do, but I feel like putting them in a bubble situation definitely helps just the NBA for an entertainment standpoint and for the better health of the players, in my opinion.
I think the NBA should go back to the bubble, and I don't think the NBA or the players are going to want to because, number one, the league lost over $1 billion during the bubble last time. And players, like you said, Josh, players don't want to go back to the bubble because they're going to be missing their friends and families, and it's a mentally and physically draining environment. And like you said, last time the bubble was only 2 months, but if they were to go into the bubble now, it would be like 4 to 6 months. So obviously something has to be done because not only is the player staff health is at risk, but the quality of the NBA is at risk too. We can't keep having blowouts, and we can't keep having teams like only playing with 8 players. So um going in the bubble really does nothing if the players and the staff aren't following the protocol. So earlier on this week, I think the NBA and the NBA Players Association met, and they said they wanted to increase testing. So they wanted to start testing, I think it was before each game and during practice. That means before, testing really wasn't as strict. So you would see a player like Zach LaVine, he would go into a game, and then hours later, after the game was over, he would go under COVID protocol. That would mean that he didn't get tested before the game. So what is going on with the testing protocol? Is it being taken as seriously? So no, I don't think that there should be a bubble, but I do think certain things should happen, like maybe going to 50% capacity, but then again, they might not like that because they're missing out on money. And or just have a brief pause for a couple of weeks where players and staff quarantine and then come back and test and then go on from there. But I do believe that the COVID protocol should be taken a lot more seriously than it has been in the past. So yeah, that's what I think about that.
And there's also an aspect of, I mean, we've seen throughout, this is the third variant. I mean, there was the first, and there's Delta, and then there's this one. We've seen with all these variants, there's always, when it really first gets introduced, there's always a spike in case numbers that lasts about 2 weeks, and then eventually it slowly dies down. And considering the NBA is like 99% vaccinated, they're all not necessarily at risk of anything serious happening. So even with a pause, I feel like it's sort of, that's almost kind of, it's not, I don't think that's necessarily going to do much because at this point, letting them continue to live, they get to build up natural immunity that they might have lost because they got vaccinated so long ago. They might be able to, they'll get it out of their system and they'll be fine. I think this is just kind of a momentary problem that the NBA just has to weather the storm, deal with what they got to deal with, and eventually it won't be an issue come February, I would argue, because we've seen these cases go down. We saw it happen with, I think we saw it happen with the NBA earlier or whatever. I don't know. It's just, we've seen it happen throughout the entire pandemic. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal after a month or two.
I just hope it doesn't affect the playoffs because everything looks good right now. Just for playoffs sake. That's the only reason.
Forget the team alive.
Yeah. The playoffs. All right. I'm kidding.
All right. Well, we're gonna go ahead and switch topics then. We're gonna move on to something else. Different sport entirely. We're gonna be talking about college football and recruiting, which we do not talk about on this show. Because in the end, Nick Saban, the SEC powerhouses, they get all the 5 stars, except for this year. That's right. Jackson State and their head coach, Deion Sanders, pulled a massive one when they got the #1 overall recruit, Travis Hunter, to flip his commitment from FSU to Jackson State. Guys, is this a good move for Travis Hunter?
Starting off, I'm gonna say there's been a lot of great NFL players that have come from HBCUs. You gotta think of people like Doug Williams, Robert Mathis, Too Tall Jones, and even the likes of Shannon Sharp. And I think the main argument or the main thought for the black crowd right now is that is he making this decision for the culture, or is this a good decision for his future? And I feel like it's gonna be a good decision for his future, but I think what he did, this decision is gonna put a ton of pressure on him going forward. You gotta think about it. This is a guy who plays the second hardest position in football to play. Every time he gets beat, teams are gonna be like, is Prime coaching him good enough? Is he getting the same type of coaching that he would have got out of Alabama or Texas A&M? Is he gonna show up every time now the lights aren't on him? Because how many times is Jackson State gonna be on national TV? They're not gonna put him over the SEC teams. They're not gonna put him over all the other teams. How are you going to continue to perform when all the odds that you worked for aren't gonna necessarily be there? So I feel like it's gonna be pressure on him to stay consistent and be good. And if he is good, the NFL will find him because the NFL finds talent. And I think it all comes down to his performance in the end. Will he perform when the lights are the biggest? And I feel like that's going to be the decision. going to be what ultimately makes his decision good or bad. It's all on Travis. If Travis is as good as he says he is, this won't be a problem. And I think he'll have made a pathway for all other black athletes to go to HBCUs. But now, if he gets lax, if this doesn't really work out, and he's in that transfer portal, or he just doesn't look as good as he says, well, as good as the scouting report says, there's going to be a lot of questions around it. So it's really all about his play, in my opinion, on if it's going to be a good decision or a bad decision for his future.
So I'm all for his decision to attend a historically black college, and he's doing something that no other player really of his caliber has done. And I believe that it could somehow influence other 5-star players to not be scared to commit to these type schools. So the whole argument that you alluded to, Cameron, was like him choosing Jackson State over FSU was like it might hurt his chances to make it to the NFL, or it might hurt his draft stock. But I don't think it's going to hurt his draft stock that much, because he already has eyes on him as of right now, with him being a 5-star and all. And I would be more compelled to watch a Jackson State game just because Travis is there. But I don't think you have to go to a D1 school to be successful. And like you said, there are plenty of athletes in the NFL that are D2 or were even D3. So a player should go to a school that fits them, not just because it's the best school. So, and if we're talking about fit, I feel like it's a great fit because Travis Hunter is a defensive back, and who would be better to coach him than a player, one of the greatest defensive backs of all time, in Deion Sanders. So, but I do agree with what you said, that it's going to be on him ultimately.
So I think it's hard to say if this is a good long-term decision because, like Cam said, there are a bunch of different variables, with the biggest one being the transfer portal. Because, I mean, there are 5-stars that go to top-tier SEC programs. Like Jamison Williams goes to OSU, doesn't get nearly any playing time, and then it transfers over to Alabama and becomes one of the nation's best wide receivers. We see, there are quarterbacks left overrate transferring this season. So it's become this like a big thing in college football. So there's no guarantee that he stays. He could just go for a year or two, pick Primetime's brain, get what he feels like he needs, and then move on to kind of get onto a bigger spotlight and raise his draft stock. So realistically, we're not going to know how good of a long-term move this was for him until we see it kind of play out. But the fact of the matter is, out of all the places he could have gone, this is probably the best one for him because, like y'all were saying, he gets to pick the brain of the greatest defensive back to ever play the game of football, who we still talk about to this day, even though passing offenses have become the big thing in football, and we now have a ton of DBs in the league that are great. Deion is still the greatest of all time. There's no question, I don't think. So he gets to go work with him, and he's able to do something that he clearly thought was important to him. So in the end, for him, I think it's a win no matter what. But I think if he puts in the work, obviously it's going to be big. I don't think necessarily going to Jackson State versus like Florida State is going to change, because in Florida State he still would have had to put the work in.
I just think it's interesting. I'm rooting for him. I definitely hope that he does do well, but I feel like it definitely elevates the pressure on him. I feel like being that big and choosing something lower, that means you're playing for something greater. He's just not representing himself with this move. He's representing every other 5-star that's thinking about doing something like this. So like I said, so with the transfer portal, if he goes up and leave, how many other 5-stars are going to be like, that probably wasn't the best move? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's definitely up to the play and how he plays, but I think it's going to be interesting on how it all turns out, really. I hope he does well, though, personally.
And plus, even if he had gone to Florida State, like there still would have been pressure on him, because Florida State fans they're supposed to be the ACC powerhouse, and they haven't been good since Jameis left town. So, he just would have had a ton more people from that area of Florida looking to him as opposed to athletes. So he was gonna have pressure on him regardless, because that's what comes with being the number 2 prospect in the nation. But I like the move. I think it's very out of the box, and I think he's going to have a great position coach to help him through this journey.
Well, if that's all you guys got, that's going to wrap it up for today. You guys have anything to say?
Like, comment, subscribe. It's quite simple. I don't know why you haven't done it yet. If you haven't, if you're watching this and you aren't subscribed, you're doing it wrong, because we do this every week, and it's always this good. So you should just tune in.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching. Takeover out.
Hey, champ. Yeah, we play it all in night. Yeah, need it all in advance. The opposition know we're ready for it. Like a supper we eating, it won't be the last. Grind out the muscle, pull up. Poker right on the grass. We coming in, take over everything, run it up. Nothing holding me back. 3 in the wood, rushing. I don't like Dutch, don't even matter, you know I'm a face. And when I roll a paper, I like to go double. Run up a check, flip a W, make it an M. I need